Hello and welcome to Biology Day 74. We're going to go ahead and continue on with our stuff. This is a screencast, so what you're seeing is the screen, the PowerPoint that I'm going to narrate over the top of it. So warm-ups are on the board, and you see our 4 questions there. Remember, we're going to turn them in on Day 75, so I'm going to continue past this. All right. So we do have the positive moment, clash prayer moment of silence. So go ahead and do whatever you feel like doing on that part. And then continuing past that, again, the warm-ups. Okay, moving on. So online test, are going to be doing the online test rewrites for Unit 5 test. The directions are on here. I've been posting them on Canvas as well. I was hoping to do something a little smoother, but this looks like the best way to do it after all. So your 86 or higher on your overall score are going to do 3 important ways evolution impacted your particular life, and then explain what they are, and then provide the rationale why, because whatever it is. If your overall score is less than 86%, you're going to answer both the 3 most important questions, and then provide the biggest challenge for you for the online test. Try to be as specific as possible in ways you can address those challenges. Okay, continuing on. Homework. So for the homework, things that you got to turn in, the HO2 animal system worksheet, and then the quiz. There is no paperwork for HO3. You can see that over here. So we're going to jump straight into HO4, which is a skeletal system and muscle system. So we're moving directly into human body systems at this point, and we'll see what we can get. So moving on from here. All right, so extra credit, you're going to pull the skeleton out. If you want to do the skeleton, it's available on Canvas. On Canvas, you can print it out, assemble it in whatever pose you think is going to be a fun one for you to put it in there, just kind of normal standing or dancing, whatever it is. And then go ahead and label the bones as they are, so you can see the bones that we've got labeled there. And then color coordinate them, so all the ribs should be the same color, the femur should be the same color, and so on. And then send me a picture of your skeleton. If you want to put it somewhere kind of fun and exciting, you can do that. And just make sure it's large enough I can see the labels on there. All right, so as we said, we're moving into the human body systems. So if you look back on the last worksheet, which was HO2, it shows the major body systems there. So we'll try to do 2 a day. Sometimes we'll just do 1 a day. But this is the ones that we had from HO2, the nervous system, integumentary system, lymphatic system, muscular system, circulatory system, skeletal system, respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system, endocrine system, and reproductive system. So today we're focusing on the muscular system and the skeletal system. The 2 of those work really well together to provide a lot of movement support for our body, give our body most of its mass that we're looking at. So you can see the important structures here: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle, the skeletal system, bones, cartilage, ligaments, and tendons in the skeletal system, as well as the major functions of each of those. So moving on. All right, so again, focusing on skeletal and muscular system. We've got 5 objectives. You can see them. Skeleton supports the body, protects internal organs, assists movement, stores minerals, and is of site of blood cell formation. The joints contain connective tissue that holds bones together. 3 types of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, cardiac, and during muscle contraction, actin and myosin fibers slide past each other to provide movement. And then the skeletal muscle also generates force and produces movement by pulling on body parts as they contract. You can see some of the key terms over here: axial skeleton, appendicular skeletons, joints, tendons, ligaments, muscle fibers, and things called sarcomeres. And then in addition, I do want you to know major bones and muscle groups, and we'll go over those today. I've got listed 2 crash course videos. They're both about 12 minutes long. One of them focuses on this muscular system, one of them focuses on the skeletal system. A key thing we want to focus on, again, with all anatomy and physiology, is understanding the form, is the anatomy part, and the function. How does that keep us alive? They'll go into a little bit more detail than I'm going to hold you responsible for, but good stuff. It's good. Hank's got good stuff on these. All right, so moving into the skeletal system. So the skeletal system functions to provide shape and support for the body. 2 major divisions: axial, which is in blue on our picture here, which is primarily skull, ribs, sternum, vertebra, and then the things that hang off of our axial skeleton, our appendages, become the appendicular skeleton. So we've got our arms and our legs there. So it's a good point to pause the video and go ahead and point to on your own body all of those major bones that you can see, part of the skull and the axial and appendicular skeleton. And the axial skeleton, major things that we have are the skull. Inside the skull we have what are called the ossicles. Those are the bones of the inner ear. Just below your chin, connected to your Adam's apple, you have a bone called the hyoid bone. That's what allows you to speak. Then we have our vertebra, which run from our neck all the way down to the tip of we have a little bit of a tailbone down there, just past our pelvis. And then we've got our ribs and our sternum on the top there. So I do want you to go ahead and add your worksheet sternum. I forgot to put that on there. We'll go ahead and add the sternum on there. It's also known as your breastbone, right in there. And go ahead and identify, again on yourself is a good one, identify the axial bones. Skull, ossicles, hyoid bone, vertebral column, rib cage, and sternum. Moving into the appendicular skeleton, it's broken up into 4 categories. We've got kind of our shoulders, which make the pectoral girdle. 2 bones in play there, the clavicle and the scapula. Then we've got our upper limb, so you can see all the bones that kind of comprise your arm. It makes up your hips, your pelvic girdle, and then the lower limbs, which is your legs. So we'll go through each one of those in a little bit more detail here. So in the pectoral girdle, which is your shoulder area, so we've got your clavicle, which is your collarbone. You've got your scapula, which is your shoulder blade across the back, and those two work together to hold the top part of your arm in place. There's a bunch of tendons and ligaments and muscles that all help that in there. So the upper single bone in your arm is called the humerus. And then we've got, going down into the arm, we've got on the thumb side of your lower arm, you've got your radius. And then on the pinky side of your lower arm, you've got your ulna. And then inside your wrist are the carpals, metacarpals, which go across kind of the meaty part of your hand, and then the fingers are the phalanges on there. And just humorous because a lot of people like that. And then moving into our lower limbs there, so the pelvic girdle. There's actually a whole bunch of bones that are fused together, but collectively they're known as the os coxae, or the pelvis. We're not going to worry about the details of what they are, just call them the os coxae. Then the major single bone that runs down your thigh is the femur. We do have a bone at the joint there, that's the patella, that's the kneecap. And we've got our tibia, which goes down the front part of your shin. You can tap your tibia is a way to remember that. That's the one that you can feel in the lower part of your leg. The fibula is a little harder to feel. It's kind of buried deep in the tissue of your calf, so you can't really reach it down there. And getting into the ankle, we've got the tarsals, which make up the ankle bones. We've got the metatarsals, which make up kind of the meaty part of your foot, and then the phalanges. So tarsals and carsals kind of sound similar, but you remember that tarsals sound like toes, so they're located near your toes. And then carpals, if you've ever heard of somebody having carpal tunnel syndrome, that's associated with the bones and the nerves that run through the hand, so that's where the carpals are. So go ahead and point to your locations on your body. You can pause the video here if you want, and kind of identify the major parts of the appendicular skeleton. Give you a moment. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right. So when we look at individual bones, we can see the individual bones are made up of different kind of layers of stuff going through them. Through most of the middle of the bone, we have this substance called spongy bone. So it's kind of soft. It looks kind of open, and it looks soft, but it's actually rigid. The material inside of it is rigid, but it looks like a kitchen sponge that you would find. It has all these open spaces. That's the site of red blood cell production and white blood cell production a little bit. And that's where a lot of that comes from. Around the outside of it, kind of the hard part that makes bone really, really tough. So we have compact bone that mostly provides support and strength to the body. And then coming up just on the really kind of edge of the bone is kind of this rind that's on the outside. It's called periosteum. It provides a protective coat to keep the bone from getting hurt on the middle. And then we have these things called growth plates. You can see them over on the right here. Those growth plates keep the bone. That's where your bone grows longer. So as your legs grow longer and your arms grow longer, that occurs with the growth plate right there. And then when you stop growing, that growth plate seals up in what's known as a growth line instead. And that's real important. I'm going to go to this next slide here. So you can see the growth plate here. So this is somebody's knee. There's patella here, femur here, top of the tibia right there, but you can see the growth plate right there and right there. And so sometimes what happens is people get injured, they fall down or they're jumping or something like that, and that growth plate can get widened or split. And so when people break their arms or their legs or any bones across the growth plate, the doctors pay attention to that to make sure that the body heals up as best it can. All right, and then how are bones connected together? That's joints. So the function to connect bone to bone. And there's three main types of joints that we deal with. One is called the moveable joints. So these are bones that are fused together. So you can see like on your skull, when you're really young and developing, the skull is kind of still a little bit squishy. And by the time you're born, it starts to fuse together in a lot of these places here. There's still a couple little spots where it's not entirely fused, but as you grow up, it does fuse solid. It meshes together, and you don't want those things moving apart. Then we have things that are slightly movable. Those are on the far right here, which would be like in your spine. So each individual vertebra can move a little bit relative to the vertebra above it or below it, but not a whole bunch. And then we've got what we call freely moving joints. So around any one particular joint, they can move around the most. These are mostly in your appendicular skeleton, and we'll focus on the freely moving joints the most. So next thing we're going to look at is the four main categories of freely moving joints. We've got ball and socket joints. They can move in any direction. So this is what we have at our shoulders going into our arm, and then our hips going into our legs. And then we've got hinge joints. So the hinge joints go back and forth on one plane. So this would be like on the knee. So your leg can extend out and back, but you can't really extend your knee to the side. If it does, then it's usually an injury of some sort that's occurred. There's something called a saddle joint. This is, you can see kind of the image here. This happens at your thumbs along there. And then finally we've got what's called a pivot joint. So this is where it rotates. And so in this case, if you hold your arm out, you can have your hand palm up or rotate it so its hand is palm down. But when you do that, your elbow itself doesn't really move locations. It's just the pivoting of that hand from front to back there. All right, so here's some videos that shows kind of the 6 types of movable joints. If you want to go into those a little bit more detail, it does show the 4 that we looked at, and it shows the other 2, but you just need to know those 4. All right, and then joint structure. So what holds movable joints together is we have things called ligaments, and that connects bone to bone. So if you look here, you can see the ligaments going across. This is the knee, again, the patella, femur, tibia, and fibia. So the ligament goes across here. So you may have heard of some people having like an ACL injury. So that's a injury that occurs to a ligament that goes across the knee. Tendons connect muscle to bone. So you can see a tendon right here. There's the muscle. Here's a tendon. And then, as I mentioned here, the Achilles tendon, which comes off the back of your calf muscle, is one of the best known tendons there. And then inside there, we also have a lot of cartilage and these things called synovial cavities, which act as a little kind of water balloon of space of fluid and to keep bone from grinding on bone. It provides a little bit of cushion there. All right, and we'll go ahead and stop there, give you guys a chance to have a stretch break. I'm going to put together a part 2 video that's going to go into the muscular system. So this is the end of part 1. All right, thanks for listening.